1946, the train whistle cut through the dry Montana air like a knife, and Jacob Sterling felt his heart hammer against his ribs as he stood on the weathered platform of Copper Ridge Station. His calloused hands clutched a faded photograph of a woman he'd never met, her serious eyes staring back at him from the sepia-toned image. Beside him, his ranch hand Tommy shifted nervously, the boy's curiosity barely contained. "You think she'll really come, boss?" Tommy asked, pushing his hat back on his head. Jacob didn't answer right away. He'd written those letters over 6 months, each one more honest than the last, pouring out the loneliness of his existence on the Triple Bar Ranch. He was 34 years old, owned 3,000 acres of good grazing land, and went to bed every night in a house so quiet he could hear the mice in the walls. The advertisement in the Matrimonial Times had seemed like a desperate measure at first, but Catherine Moore's responses had been thoughtful, measured, and refreshingly frank. She was 28, a schoolteacher in Philadelphia, and her letters painted pictures of a woman who valued honesty over romance, partnership over passion. But she'd never mentioned her mother. The train hissed to a stop, steam billowing across the platform in white clouds that smelled of coal and iron. Passengers began to disembark, their city clothes and leather cases marking them as travelers just passing through this dusty corner of the territory. Jacob's eyes scanned each face, looking for the woman from the photograph. Then he saw her. Catherine Moore stepped down from the passenger car with careful dignity, her dark green traveling dress modest but well made, her auburn hair pinned in a neat bun beneath a simple hat. She was prettier than her photograph suggested, with high cheekbones and a determined set to her jaw. But what stopped Jacob's breath wasn't Catherine herself. It was the elderly woman she was helping down the steps, one careful movement at a time. The older woman was small and frail, her white hair visible beneath a black bonnet, her movements slow and deliberate. Catherine held her arm with infinite patience, murmuring something Jacob couldn't hear as they navigated the metal steps together. When they finally reached the platform, Catherine looked up and met Jacob's eyes directly. There was no apology in her gaze, but there was a question. Jacob walked forward, his boots heavy on the wooden planks. Up close, he could see the fine lines of worry around Catherine's eyes, the way her free hand clutched a worn carpetbag, the protective stance she'd taken beside the older woman. "Miss Moore?" he asked, removing his hat. "Mr. Sterling." Her voice was clear and educated, with that Eastern refinement that always sounded foreign out here. "This is my mother, Eleanor Moore." She paused, and he watched her throat work as she swallowed. "I apologize for not mentioning her in my letters. I was afraid you wouldn't want me if you knew I couldn't come alone." Eleanor Moore looked up at him with eyes that must have been blue once, but had faded to the color of winter sky. She was thin as a bird, her hands trembling slightly where they gripped her daughter's arm. "Ma'am," Jacob said, nodding to her. Then he looked back at Catherine. "Your last letter said you'd arrive today. I've been preparing the house. I understand if this changes things." Catherine said quickly, "My mother is not well. She has palsy, and she needs help with many daily tasks. If you cannot accommodate both of us, we can take the next train back to Philadelphia. I have enough money set aside for the return fare." Tommy had come up behind Jacob, staring openly at the two women. Several other townspeople had gathered at a respectful distance, their curiosity palpable. Jacob could feel their eyes on him, waiting to see what he'd do. This would be the talk of Copper Ridge for weeks, he realized. The cowboy who'd sent for a mail order bride and got a package deal instead. He looked at Eleanor Moore again, really looked at her. She was watching him with a kind of fierce dignity despite her infirmity. her chin raised as if daring him to find her wanting. It reminded him suddenly of his own mother, who died 5 years ago after nursing his father through his final illness. She'd been strong until the very end, proud even when her body failed her. Miss Moore, Jacob said slowly, I wrote in my 3rd letter that the Triple Bar has a main house with 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor, and a dining room. Most of those rooms haven't been used in years. I also wrote that I'm not a man who goes back on his word. He shifted his hat in his hands. I asked you to come out here to be my wife, and I asked you to trust me. I reckon the least I can do is show you the same trust. Catherine's eyes widened slightly. You mean, I mean my home has room for both of you, Jacob said. If you're willing to marry me knowing what kind of life you're getting into, then your mother is welcome under my roof for as long as she needs. The relief that washed over Catherine's face was so profound it made Jacob's chest tighten. Eleanor Moore's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out with one trembling hand to touch Jacob's arm. You're a good man, she whispered, her voice thin and reedy. Jacob didn't know about that, but he knew right from wrong. He turned to Tommy. Help me with their trunks. Ladies, the wagon's just over here. I'm afraid it's not the most comfortable ride, but it's about an hour out to the ranch. The journey back to the Triple Bar gave Jacob time to think about what he'd just committed to. Catherine sat beside him on the wagon bench, her mother wrapped in blankets between them, and he was acutely aware of how little he knew these women. Catherine kept one arm around Eleanor, steadying her against the bumps and ruts in the road, and he found himself noticing small things. The way Catherine's fingers were ink-stained, marking her as someone who truly had been a teacher. The way she pointed out landmarks to her mother, trying to make the strange landscape less foreign. The way Eleanor dozed off against her daughter's shoulder, trustful as a child. I should explain, Catherine said quietly, after they'd been riding for perhaps 20 minutes. My mother took ill 3 years ago. The doctors called it shaking palsy. She can walk short distances with help, but she tires easily, and her hands shake too much for fine work. She was living with my brother and his wife in Philadelphia, but she paused, choosing her words carefully. My sister-in-law found the arrangement burdensome. When I saw your advertisement, I thought perhaps a fresh start would be good for all of us. Your brother didn't object to you leaving? Jacob asked. Catherine's mouth tightened. My brother was relieved. One less responsibility. Jacob didn't press further. He understood family complications well enough. His own brother had left Montana years ago, heading to California and never looking back. The Triple Bar came into view as they crested the final ridge. Jacob tried to see it through their eyes. The sprawling log house with its covered porch, the barn and outbuildings, the corrals where his horses milled about, the distant mountains purple against the sky. It wasn't Philadelphia, that was certain. It's beautiful, Catherine said softly, and he glanced at her in surprise. She was gazing at the ranch with something like wonder. I've never seen so much space, so much sky. Eleanor roused herself, blinking at the view. Is that really all yours? Yes, ma'am. 3,000 acres, give or take. I run about 500 head of cattle, plus horses. Have 3 hands who live in the bunkhouse yonder. He pointed to the smaller building beyond the barn. The house itself was cleaner than it had been in years, thanks to 3 days of frantic scrubbing. Jacob had enlisted Tommy and the other hands to help, and they'd teased him mercilessly while washing windows and beating rugs. But now, as he helped Eleanor down from the wagon and watched Catherine take in her new home, he was glad for the effort. The front room smelled of the pine soap he'd used on the floors, and fresh curtains purchased from Mrs. Chen's store in town, hung at the windows. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and solid and warm. "I put your mother in the downstairs bedroom," Jacob said, gesturing to a door off the main hallway. "Figured it would be easier than stairs. There's a wash basin and a good stove in there to keep it warm. Our room is upstairs, but I can sleep in one of the other rooms until after the wedding. I thought we might go into town day after tomorrow. Let Reverend Walsh perform the ceremony." Catherine was walking slowly through the rooms, her trained teacher's eye taking in every detail. She paused in the kitchen, running her hand over the large wooden table, examining the cast-iron stove, the pump at the sink. "This is a good house," she said finally, "a strong house. Built it with my father," Jacob said. He had hopes for a big family, didn't quite work out that way. Elinor had settled into a rocking chair by the fireplace, and her eyes were drifting closed again. The journey had exhausted her. "Let me help you get your mother settled," Jacob said. "Then I'll show you the rest." They worked together in careful silence, Catherine unpacking her mother's things while Jacob carried in the trunks. He'd arranged the downstairs bedroom with an invalid in mind. The bed was low and sturdy. There was a comfortable chair by the window, and he'd made sure the room was warm. Catherine moved efficiently, helping her mother change into a nightgown, settling her under the quilts with gentle hands. When Elinor was asleep, Catherine emerged from the bedroom and sagged against the wall, exhaustion written in every line of her body. "When did you last eat?" Jacob asked. "I'm not sure. Yesterday sometime. Come on." He led her to the kitchen and set about making coffee and sandwiches, basic fare but filling. Catherine sat at the table and watched him move around the space with the ease of long practice. "You cook?" she asked. "Had to learn. Been on my own for 5 years now, and my hands can barely boil water without burning it." He set a plate in front of her. "It's nothing fancy." Catherine took a bite and closed her eyes. "It's perfect." They ate in silence for a while, the awkwardness of strangers settling between them. Finally, Catherine spoke. "I need to be honest with you about what you've taken on, Mr. Sterling. My mother requires significant care. She needs help bathing and dressing. She can't be left alone for long periods. She has good days and bad days, and on the bad days, she can become confused or distressed. I don't expect you to help with all of that. I can manage it. But I need you to understand that my time won't entirely be my own." Jacob nodded slowly. "I appreciate the honesty. For my part, I need to be honest too. Ranch life is hard. The work is never done. Winter here is brutal. We can be snowed in for weeks. The closest neighbor is 5 miles away, and town is an hour's ride. It's isolated and it's lonely, and it's not the life you're used to." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Catherine said. "And I'm not afraid of isolation. What I'm afraid of is feeling like a burden." "You're not a burden," Jacob said firmly. "Neither is your mother. I asked you here because I wanted a partner, someone to build a life with. That life includes caring for family when they need it. My mother spent the last 2 years of her life caring for my father when he couldn't walk anymore. I saw what real partnership looked like then. It's not just the good times." Catherine's eyes met his, and something passed between them. An understanding, perhaps, a recognition of shared values. "Why did you place that advertisement?" she asked. "A man with a ranch like this, surely you could have found someone local." Jacob turned his coffee cup in his hands. "There aren't many unmarried women out here, and the few there are, well, let's just say we didn't suit. I wanted someone who understood that a marriage is more than romance and pretty words. I wanted someone sensible. Your letters were sensible. That's a strange compliment. It's a good one, out here." The wedding took place 2 days later in the small church in Copper Ridge, with Tommy and Mrs. Chen as witnesses. Catherine wore a simple blue dress, and Jacob wore his cleanest shirt and his father's old suit coat. Elinor sat in the front pew, her trembling hands folded in her lap, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Reverend Walsh kept the ceremony brief and practical, as if he understood this was a union born of necessity as much as hope. When Jacob kissed his new wife, it was chaste and careful, a promise more than a passion. The real wedding night came later, after they'd returned to the ranch and settled Elinor for the evening. Jacob and Catherine stood in the upstairs bedroom, the awkwardness thick between them. "I don't expect," Jacob started. "I understand," Catherine said at the same time. They both stopped, and Catherine's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "I'm your wife," she said quietly. "I understand what that means, but I also understand that we barely know each other. Perhaps we could take our time." Relief flooded through Jacob. "I'd like that. I want this to be a real marriage, Catherine, but I want it to be right." She nodded, and some of the tension left her shoulders. "Thank you." The first weeks of their marriage unfolded in a careful dance of adjustment. Catherine rose early, helped her mother with morning routines, then set about learning the rhythms of ranch life. She was quick and observant, noting when Jacob needed coffee poured, when the hands would come in hungry from the range, how to manage the large stove and the endless cooking required to feed working men. Elinor, for her part, seemed to blossom in the Montana air. The change of scenery, or perhaps simply being somewhere she was wanted, brought color back to her cheeks. She couldn't do much, but she sat in the kitchen while Catherine worked, telling stories of her own youth, offering advice